All right, so some of you sent me this article that you wanted me to react to. I don't usually react to articles because it's not a video, right? But I thought it pertained. I thought we'd just look at it briefly. This is an article on Psychology Today written by Isabel Morley, PsyD, which is the same degree that I have. And it is called The Unforgivable Mistake in the Love is Blind Reunion. Even reality television should have an ethical duty to protect people. So I'm guessing this has to do with Colleen, I'm guessing. So it says the key points here are reality show producers are not held to a professional ethical code like therapists are, and they don't have to adhere to HIPAA. So I'm guessing that this is because they're saying that, you know, for us clinicians, we have an ethical and professional code and an obligation to take action under certain circumstances, perhaps if someone is being abused. It's a little bit of a gray zone. It's a case-by-case basis. There are situations usually, I believe in all states, if not most states in the United States, that mandate that we report if we hear of any kind of abuse to children or dependent adults. There's no gray zone there. Whereas with abuse between adults, again, it's a case-by-case basis. And also HIPAA, which has to do with confidentiality and records and this kind of thing. So they're saying that the producers of the show, you know, they don't have an ethical professional obligation to step in or do something if there are signs of domestic violence, intimate partner violence. Okay. Number two, entertainment should never supersede safety, although it appears to have been allowed to on Love is Blind. So entertainment should never supersede safety. I think meaning that, okay, fine, you know, if you're trying to make something that's entertaining or interesting and has drama, great, but that shouldn't supersede the safety of the individuals on the show. Yeah, I agree with that. Number three, people in abusive relationships need support and resources no matter the environment in which the abuse takes place. Yeah. All right, so a little bit down here it says, the author says, I stand by my assessment of Cole and Zeneb's relationship. I actually clicked through to that article, and it's titled, Will Zeneb and Cole from Love is Blind Stay Together? And I glanced over it. It actually goes over the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse put forward by John Gottman, detailing Zeneb's critical nature, Cole's veiled criticism, Zeneb's display of contempt, the magic 5-1 ratio, which you'll hear me talk about, and it goes over some scenes and then actually provides an update to the article after the reunion. And basically what the author, I don't want to put words in the author's mouth, but it sounds like the author is basically having a common reaction to the cutie scene that a lot of us had. So as I predicted, the article is about Matt and potential intimate partner violence, and they're saying that the lackeys, when Matt was confronted about his behavior, he said, I kinda lose my cool a little bit. And during the reunion, when I watched it, I did react to that and think like, well, that's not encouraging the way that he phrased that, because that's not how I would phrase it. Now, who knows what's really happening? And we don't know. I mean, they could be in therapy. He could be very self-aware. Who knows what's really happening? So we don't know much. It goes on to talk about how at the reunion that people don't defend Colleen and they do not reprimand Matt. The article seems to be blaming the hosts for not confronting Matt on it. And we don't know what happened entirely in the reunion because I think they talk for hours and they edit it down. So, you know, it's hard to know. Goes on to talk here about Colleen's body language, her breathing change, which I don't know if we saw evidence of that per se, and her heart race. Well, we heard her talk about that. Stiff and anxious the entire episode. She barely smiles, stumbles over her words. Yeah, I think a lot of people interpret it, including myself. I mean, I didn't interpret it this way, but I raised the hypothesis that are we seeing someone that's being victimized and has been further beaten down and is not wanting to say anything because she's worried about being abused, or she's been beaten because, you know, it was a year and a half or a year or so later or something, and are we seeing someone that's more and more abused, and the body language between the two of them? But I said this then, that going off that data to draw a conclusion would be completely ridiculous and irresponsible. The author seems to be at least strongly concluding or strongly hypothesizing that abuse had been ongoing after the show had stopped, filming in between the reunion and the season. Yeah, it says here, if Matt is as abusive as he appeared on screen, which, right, that's a big if, of course, but that's an if. It's not saying it is happening. So if Matt is as abusive as he appeared on screen, then the Latchies and the entire production team made an unforgivable mistake. They put Colleen in the line of fire for more abuse. They reopened the first trigger of Matt's abuse and encouraged contestants to rehash their reactions. Yeah, so as the author said in the beginning, that these production teams and the hosts don't have an ethical responsibility, a professional responsibility to do something if there are signs of abuse, but it's perhaps not a good thing that you have reality TV shows that don't have measures in place to try to protect the cast members from abuse. So yeah, I could agree with that in a general sense. But it's a lot to ask because most people, let alone reality TV show production teams, don't really understand intimate partner violence. But then you could say, well, they should get to know it because they live in that world, right? So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think these shows should be held responsible so say Matt had been abusive and that the reunion never really got into that, never touched on that? Should they be held? But what kind of, I guess you could sue them in civil court, like Colleen gets divorced. And I mean, of course, anyone can sue anyone for anything, but should that be something that, should Colleen be awarded damages if it comes out that she was being abused and the show didn't ask questions? I mean, I don't know, that doesn't really fit with how I see things. I think that looking for a scapegoat is sometimes satisfying, but I don't know if it's it's Matt's. If Matt is being abusive, which we don't know, then it's Matt's fault, and he needs to stop. And abusive people need to stop. And to blame the show for it, I think it's just I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the show should be to blame, that they should potentially pay damages in that hypothetical situation? I don't know. I could see it going either way, I guess. Okay, and then at the bottom, they have the author has some recommendations. Number one, the show should hire a psychologist or maybe a few to support the contestants. Yeah, this is often suggested by even just lay individuals that watch the show, and I think that'd be great, obviously. But given the way that these shows operate, I can't imagine it being. I can't imagine it working because, for example, for me, if I were on these shows and I was involved, in order for me probably to uphold my ethical responsibilities, I would probably have to recommend to the cast members that they get off the show. Like with Matt and Colleen, if I were there or they showed me the footage and then I arrived the next day and talked to Matt and Colleen, if I were to be true to my thinking in a moment like that, I would be thinking, well, the footage seems to exhibit that Matt has a tendency to become abusive. I can't know, but until I know, then I don't want these two to be in a situation where drama is encouraged by the production team, because that could result in victimization. I guess also that Matt could be encouraged to do something that would harm him legally or something. So if I were truly in their corner, which sometimes when a TV show or an organization hires you, you have to actually figure out conflicts of interest, because if the client is the TV show, are you really in the corner of the contestants when there's a conflict, right? So there are ethical and professional considerations there. But personally, I would want to give preference to the human beings on the show and not to some thing that organization that's trying to make money, right? So if a psychologist were or some other professional were to be there, I would imagine that they would ruin the show. I mean, I would. At the very least, I would say, how about we spend a few months assessing this and getting treatment and avoiding any kind of stressors, so maybe don't do anything of note while the cameras are there, while we're trying to figure this out, right? So yeah, but if they hired psychologists, people often suggest this for 90 Day Fiance or now Married at First Sight claims that they have a clinician there, and then they always, for the seasons that I saw, they had a marriage and family therapist, doctoral level person, and they had a minister who presumably has experience with talking with couples, and then there was a social scientist, a woman from University of Washington, my alma mater, who is not a clinician, but it has been a part of a lot of studies regarding social sciences. So there is a clinician, at least one, involved in Married at First Sight, and the way it looked to me was not sufficient because the meetings were pretty brief. There seemed to be a pretty big agenda that the marriage and family therapist would bring to those meetings with the couples. I can't know that, but it seemed like the clinician was either purposely or manipulated or something, or coincidentally more of a tool for the show rather than being truly there for the clients. So yeah, I mean, so if there were a clinician that was involved, the role would have to be defined very clearly. Like, when would they be able to step in and assert authority over the show, right? And would a professional want to do that? The other thing is that they should probably be an independent contractor, meaning they don't work for the show, because there would be a conflict of interest there. So like there would be a third party that would even pay them, so that there were clear boundaries around that. I don't know. Of course, it'd be a good idea, but in reality, I just can't see it being a practical thing that would work very well. Number two, or at the very least, like one of the things the shows could do is they could say, they could require, actually, maybe this is the best option, is the shows would require the cast members to be in treatment with an outside independent, clinician before they even get on the show. They, for the a couple of months before they come on the show, they have to meet with this person and show paperwork that they're actually meeting with a clinician. And maybe there's a stable of clinicians that know how to work with these people on these shows. But those clinicians don't work for the show, they're not beholden to the show, and the production team could have confidence that the cast members at least have someone that they can talk to if there was a problem, right? That would work. And the production team would require that, right? They'd be like, you cannot come on the show unless you already have that set up. And if you stop going to your meetings, we're kicking you out of the pods, or whatever the thing is. I would imagine that would be the best model. Number two, it says the producers need to intervene when there's abuse. They must protect contestants' welfare. Again, yes, that'd be nice, but that assumes that producers know what it looks like, that they know what intimate partner violence look like. Given my experience with lay people, I would imagine that a lot of people, when they watch the Matt and Colleen scenes, including the producers, would think, well, that's not abusive because he's not hitting her. A lot of people still consider abuse to only involve physical violence, right? So I don't know that for sure, but I imagine that that's true. Plus, in order to get producers to do that, I would imagine you'd have to pass legislation. And is that kind of the world we want to live in? I mean, I don't know. Morally, should they reach out? Yeah, I think so. Like, if I'm a producer, of one of these shows and I see someone that is in peril, regardless of what my boss is telling me to do or what's going to make a good show, I would hope that their morality would dictate that they would actually try to help. And maybe they do. I don't know. I get the impression when I talk to cast members that there are some producers that are really compassionate and really nurturing, and there are some producers that were less so. So it probably varies. Number three, they should air the number for the domestic violence hotline or other resources. Yeah, I don't think that that's critical, because you just Google it. Anyone can look it up at any time. And Google, even if you just type in a random sentence that might be equated with domestic violence or intimate partner violence, Google will show you the domestic violence hotline as the top search item. would it be a great idea if these shows did provide these resources? Yeah, of course, I'm going to stand behind that. But I don't know if that would address it. I don't know if it's their responsibility. I mean, in a perfect world for me, I'll tell you my perfect world. And I've studied this a lot, and I have colleagues who also have studied this a lot more than I have with community psychology, this kind of thing, public health. In a perfect world, this United States would have voters that would vote people into office and pressure them to allocate, legislatures to allocate funds to public health. Like the public health budget should be 50 times as big or 25 times as big as it is now. And there would be a lot of initiatives that the public health system would be tasked with or increased in their activity, because as it is right now, the program that I'm proposing couldn't be done because of the other things that public health has to take care of. So essentially, public health are government workers who are not for profit. They're not private organizations, but they're being paid by the government for the good of the people to raise awareness and help people get resources or even potentially treat people with health and mental health issues, okay, and social issues. So one of the programs, and I'm guessing that these programs exist, but they're vastly underfunded, is that public health would have enough money, enough resources, enough people that they would actually get production teams to make little commercials, and then they would buy spots on television or the internet or something to raise awareness about a variety of things, including intimate partner violence, right? The fact that a TV show, that we would task a random reality TV show with educating the public about this, shows how backwards our system is. It's a good idea, of course, raise awareness, but the fact that we don't have a government program that is robustly funded to be able to do that is absurd. I think everyone would agree that we should raise awareness about intimate partner violence in addition to whole other things, child abuse. There's a whole suite of things that I don't think would be a partisan issue, but it is a partisan issue in terms of allocating funds. I mean, we have politicians and perhaps whole political parties that, because of this religion to smaller government that they adhere to, want to dismantle every single program and organization that we have in our government, which is not okay. And I consider to be immoral, because we cannot rely on the private sector, Netflix, for example, to be the educators for these kinds of issues. It's just not. For-profit organizations and marketers are never going to do it right. And number 4, there should be a message on screen during an abusive interaction so that viewers know the behavior is unacceptable and know not to normalize it. Yeah, I don't know how that would look, but I could get behind that one, because I think I did think that at the time. I don't know if I said it or not, but those scenes with Matt and Colleen, I remember wondering, I was like, are people seeing what I'm seeing? Because this is pretty eerie. This is pretty concerning. At the time, I also probably said, I don't know what this means. I don't know if this is the tip of the iceberg. I don't know if this is just a temporary thing. I don't know if he's in treatment. I don't know if he's going to get treatment. I don't know. I don't know if Colleen is being abusive behind the scenes and in different ways. I just can't tell, obviously. But it would be nice if there was something. So I guess in a perfect world, the show, again, wouldn't be responsible for it, but public health would have a lot of money and they'd be able to publicize information. It'd be like, so anyone watching Love is Blind Season 3? Well, let's watch a little scene here and let's identify the signs of intimate partner violence. We, of course, can't tell with Matt, but we can identify red flags here and da-da-da. So if you ever see anything that you want me to react to, you want to email me by going to the website, clicking on the contact button. If you comment below or you DM me or something, in all likelihood, I'm not going to see it, or it's going to be hard for me to copy it. When you email me, it ends up in my email box and I can kind of look at it on my computer. And so anyway, that was interesting. Again, Psychology Today article written by Isabel Morley. It's interesting that a psychologist, a fellow clinician, is going into this kind of material, which I think is good, because it gets clicks and it raises awareness, which is great. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.